Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional, and welcome to 2024, a brand new year. We can leave 2023 behind. We never have to think about it again if we don't want to, and we can start fresh. And one of the best things about starting off a new year is thinking about all of the wonderful books that we are going to be able to read this year. Now, this could include books that have been on our TBR for quite a while. They may have been published last year or the year before or a few years ago, or they might be brand new books coming out this year. And so that is what we are going to be talking about today. This is our most anticipated books episode. We're going to be talking about books coming out between January and April of 2024. Now, I'm very, very excited to talk about some of my books. There are some books on my list that I have been very, very, very much looking forward to. And I'm very excited to hear what all of my other book friends have today as well. So joining me today, all of my book friends, I have Al. Hello, Al. I have Emma. Hello, Emma. Virginia. Good morning, Virginia. And Kareen. Hello, Kareen. And we are all going to bring you 5 books over the next 2 episodes that we are excited to read in the next few months. So why don't we get started right into it? We are going to start off with Kareen. Kareen, what is your first anticipated pick today?
Yes, I am so excited about this book. I have been looking forward to it for such a long time. It's one of my favorite authors who usually just like kicks it out of the park every year. Her Book of Cold Cases was one of my favorites of 2022. And I don't think that she kind of came out with anything this year, although I could be mistaken because there was one about the house and then the old lady, and that was kind of weird. But anyways, this one looks like a return to form for Simone St. James, one of my favorite authors, as I had mentioned. And her new book coming out in March is called Murder Road, which has nothing to do with Mad Max, but does have to do with kind of one of my favorite urban legends. And so this takes place in the good old retro year of 1995, where a couple, April and Eddie, are driving down a stretch of road called the Atticus Line. And as they are driving along, they see a young female hitchhiker standing in the side of the road. And this is a kind of long stretch of road, buffeted by each side by kind of like a dark, foreboding forest, and only kind of small little spotted towns in and amongst this wilderness. And so they think it a little bit strange that this young woman is off, kind of looking for a ride in the middle of essentially nowhere. But they take pity on her. They're a young couple and they kind of have a lot of empathy for her. So they pull over and ask her into the back seat. Everything seems pretty normal until Eddie and April notice the blood seeping out of her jacket. The hitchhiker quickly loses consciousness before she's able to explain what has happened to her. They rush her to the hospital of the nearby small town, where unfortunately, she dies. April and Eddie are the last person to see her alive, and so the police quickly start to question them. And April and Eddie begin to understand that this young lady is not the only person who has died mysteriously on the stretch of the Atticus Line. In fact, there's a horrible history of people going missing and people being murdered. And at first, they are witnesses. April and Eddie quickly become the police's only suspects. And so they must work to find the murderer of this young girl and clear their names in what is no doubt going to be a delightfully supernatural thriller, tackling things, different issues in true crime, and well written, and it's going to be kind of ghosty, and I'm like really thrilled for it. Yes, so my very first pick was a very easy one. I have never not enjoyed a Simone St. James book. She has a backlist of like these like World War I supernatural ghosty thrillers and then has kind of been moving up into, and this is like a horrible thing to realize, but like the 90s is now history, and we're not in it, and I'm not comfortable with this being kind of like classified as historical fiction. But here we are. Yeah, so she's kind of delving into a period that I love and apparently am still in the headspace in, and this one looks fantastic. Love a good like hitchhiker ghost story. So I am going to switch this over to Emma, who I feel like has a great list of picks for 2024.
Thank you, Karine. So, as we are all kind of aware of at this point, I have kind of a typical kind of thing that I like to read. I love to read graphic novels. I love to read manga, and I'm especially drawn to, like Karine mentioned with her book, something that's kind of supernatural, kind of paranormal. I always love graphic novels with a little paranormal in it. Don't necessarily love horror like some of our other book friends do. I'm looking at you, Al. But I do love books that are a little bit spooky, a little bit creepy, and especially books that are kind of about ghosts or the afterlife. And so one of the books that I'm really looking forward to this year actually reminds me a lot of a kids graphic novel that I read this past year in 2023 called Ghost Book. And Ghost Book is about these two kids. One of them is a girl named July. The other is a boy who is kind of between life and death. He's a wandering soul. And so the whole point of the book is that July has to help him kind of find his way back to his body, find his way back to his life before his soul is lost forever. And so this next book that I'm really looking forward to for this upcoming year kind of has similar spooky vibes to it. It's called Ghost Roast, and it's by twin authors named Shawnee and Shawnell Gibbs. And it's a teen young adult graphic novel, and the publisher describes it as a paranormal adventure full of first crushes, lost histories, and the impossible task of fitting in when your dad is a professional ghost hunter. So there's a lot going on here that I'm looking forward to. The main character, Chelsea, lives with her dad in New Orleans, and she attends a prestigious high school. And at the beginning of the book, she kind of finally becomes in with the popular crowd. She goes out with them for a night, and that night goes awry. And her punishment is to help her dad with his paranormal remover business. So he's like a ghostbuster. Um, Chelsea soon discovers that, unlike her father, who hunts ghosts using his own DIY tech that he makes, she can actually see them. And so she's kind of got to deal with like, oh, my dad's a ghost hunter, but I can see ghosts. So I have more empathy for them and kind of understand what they're going through. So she meets this handsome ghost named Oliver, and she has to figure out how she can save him before her father exorcises him. So the book seems like it's going to have everything that I love in young adult fiction. It's got a wholesome romance going on. There's going to be a lot of paranormal shenanigans. And on top of that, it's a graphic novel, which I always love. So fans like me who really like books like Ghost Book, who like the manga Bleach, or even people who like the old Nickelodeon cartoon Danny Phantom, will probably really love this book, as will anybody who really likes comics or any kind of paranormal teen romance. So I can't wait to read Ghost Roast, which is going to be out January 2nd. And I'm going to pass it along to Al. I want to hear what Al wants to read.
All right. So, surprising absolutely no one after my top five of 2023, the first book that I'm happily anticipating in 2024 is a horror novel, well, novella. This is a sequel to What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. It's called What Feasts at Night. So, following their adventure at the Usher Manor, Alex Easton is ready for some rest and routine to take their mind off it. But instead, as a favor to friends, they find themselves heading to their family hunting lodge deep in the cold, damp forests of their home country of Galatia. It could have been relaxing under the right circumstances, but when Easton arrives, they find that the caretaker is dead, the lodge is in disarray, and the locals are whispering about a breath-stealing monster stalking the halls. Not one to believe in superstition, Easton and their man Angus set working, trying to get the lodge back in shape, but something is definitely not quite right at home, and Easton's dreams are becoming unsettling. So, non-binary lead in a gothic horror novella, sign me up. I loved What Moves the Dead, which is a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher with scary mushrooms. So when I heard that the main character would be returning for a new story in 2024, I was immediately sold. Galatia is the country that Alex Easton comes from and sort of has a culture of non-binary soldiers, which I think is really cool. So the fact that it looks like we'll be learning more about this fictional home country is intriguing to me, but surprising no one, it's the horror that I'm really excited for. T. Kingfisher has written a bunch of horror that I've really enjoyed. So even if I hadn't loved What Moves the Dead, I'd probably be excited about this one. Advanced readers have praised the book for its atmospheric writing and some witty lines from Easton, which squares from what I know of T. Kingfisher's writing overall. So I'm sure this is going to be a fun and spooky read with which to start off the year. And I think I'm going to throw it to Virginia.
Yeah, so Sadie has told me that at some point we're going to have to do an episode where we report back on these most anticipated books that we have read and see whether they actually meet our expectation. So because of that, I have to stop myself from reading these books ahead of time, which was really, really hard. But I did read the first two. I did read the first two, but that was before I found out. So yeah. So the first one, this book, as you long-time listeners will know that one of Corinne's favorite publisher in print is Pushkin Vertical, which I don't know if there will be another book that show up today, but like they do especially do like sort of like kind of crime writing from around the world. And the ones that are our favorite usually are the classic sort of like golden age mysteries that are translated from Japanese. But Pushkin also does other kind of lines, and one of the things that they have started last year was this series of like novella, again also from Japan. And so one of the new additions to this year's this line is going to be Harlequin Butterfly by Tall Angel. And this is one, like I said, I have read it. I loved it. I know what the book is about? Not really. So reading it doesn't actually help. But I'll attempt to describe this book to you. This is a book about supposedly about a billionaire, A. Abrams, and she is for whatever reason obsessed in finding out the true identity of this one particular author who goes by the name of Tomoyuki. So she's so obsessed that she has this like organization of agents that she sent around the world to try to find this person, because Tomoyuki supposedly writes in different languages. And whenever this person goes and stay in a country, they will adopt sort of the language, learn it, and then write only in that language. And then they will move on to another country. And every single time that A. Abrams and her agents caught like just a little tiny little clue of where Tomoyuki might be, then like they would disappear without a trace. So it is just something that like she's totally obsessed with. And so that's supposedly sort of what that story is about. And when we first meet A. Abrams, she's on a plane. That's where basically she spent most of her life, because, and we hear this from our narrator point of view. He was also on the plane and he was trying to read a book. And he was having a lot of difficulty focusing on the book because he can't really read when he was traveling. Like he finds that the words just like that the words he reads them, but nothing makes sense. And it doesn't help that he was reading a book called The Untold Tales for Those with Three Arms. And so is it really that he couldn't understand it because, like he can't read when traveling, or is it because he doesn't have three arms? So that's why he doesn't understand it. He's trying to figure it out. And you can see why this is like immediately a book I'm just like, okay, this is something that I need to read. And so he was like, he couldn't concentrate. So he's just looking around and he saw this person who is like secretly taking out this like tiny little net. It's this beautiful, like kind of a net that you probably use to catch like butterflies. And it's like made of silver, so it's like shiny and just very delicately looking. And this other passenger was just like kind of waving it all around. And so he was very curious, like, what are you doing? And when the other person saw that he was looking, like she started to explain what it is, and it turns out, and this is A. Abrams, and she's saying that this is her net that is specially made, and there's like 1,000, a million spells that are woven into this tiny little silver net, and she uses it to catch ideas. And what is a better place to catch ideas than a plane, when you have just all these people just sitting there, have nothing to do, and they're just thinking all sorts of thoughts or ideas and thoughts all just escaping from their mind. And so she uses this to catch these ideas or whatever. And as they were talking, he started talking about his issues with like reading a book, on a plane. And he was thinking like, oh, if only there's a book that is written just for people who are, who should be read only when they're traveling. And that gave like sort of started this A. Abrams ideas of like, maybe I need to start a series of books that have titles like, and they're specialized books, like books that can be read only when traveling, books that you finish in 2 minutes when you're doing a headstand, and of course, the books to be read only under a cat. And that's all I kind of know about this. I knew this was going to be a book that Corinne is just going to be like, just stop talking. Now, like I said, I don't really know like what the book is about, but I think it has a lot to do with languages and stories and translations, which of course is like something that I'm super interested in. And it's coming out in March, and I already told our book friend Mark to go read it, because if there's anyone who will understand what the heck is happening, it's probably going to be him. So it's going to smart us. So I already told him like he has to read this book, and he had to come back and explain to me what is going on. So yeah, if you are also looking for something like super weird, but it's like super interesting, and I think for me, I don't really, as you know, I don't really need to know what the book is about most of the time. As long as I enjoy the ride, it's good. I think Corinne needs A to B to C. I just need a whole mixture of A to B and C all together with an S thrown in every now and then, and I'm good to go. So yeah, so that is Harlequin Butterfly by Tall Angel. And now let's bring some more sense back to this episode, we're going to go to Sadie.
I was gonna say, Kareen, did you want to do you want to interject there for a second?
A to B to C, it's not so much to ask.
I feel like I don't always agree with you, Kareen. I don't always agree with you, Virginia. But in this case, I do have to agree with Kareen. For myself, I do. I need a good A to B to C. Yeah, I am. And I think that you will get that in my first anticipated pick for 2024. Good segue, right? So this is actually a joint author book, which I'm not entirely sure how I feel about. I have not read a lot of books that are written by more than one author. I don't actually know if I've read any that have been written by more than one author, so I'm a little bit curious about how that kind of plays out in this kind of book. So this is one of my really favorite authors, and one author that I have read one of her books and really enjoyed, The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Janie Chang. Kate Quinn is best known for the Alice Network, the Rose Code, the Huntress, and Janie Chang is known for Dragon Springs Road, the Library of Legends, the Porcelain Moon. And so these two kind of powerhouse authors have gotten together to write a historical fiction mystery thriller, is sort of how it is being advertised here. So this story takes place in San Francisco in 1906. And it is a bustling city, lots of kind of upstart companies and lots of schemes and millionaires just kind of coming into their money. And the story follows two very different women kind of living in two very different places in the city and two very different lives. So we have Gemma, who is a golden haired, silver voiced soprano. Now, Gemma, unfortunately, her career is not as good as it once was. She's in desperate need of something to kind of put her back in the spotlight and put her back kind of on the right path. And then we have Su Ling, and Su Ling is a embroideress in Chinatown, and she is unfortunately trying to escape an arranged marriage. Now, their paths cross when they are drawn together because of a man named Henry Thornton. And Henry Thornton is a railroad magnate. He's very charming. He is quite wealthy. He has an absolutely extraordinary collection of Chinese antiquities, including one fabled crown called the Phoenix Crown. And this is a relic from Beijing's fallen summer palace. Now, Henry Thornton brings these two women together and kind of gives them the opportunity to kind of change their lives around and do something with this Phoenix crown. I'm not exactly sure what, to kind of change their fortunes and kind of create the lives that they are wanting. However, those who are aware of history might also know that in San Francisco in 1906, there was a devastating earthquake. And so, true to their research and true to kind of their accuracy, Kate Quinn and Janie Chang are focusing on the time period accurately and focusing on that earthquake. And so, both Gemma and Su Ling, their lives are thrown into turmoil when the earthquake hits. And when the earthquake hits, Thornton disappears. Nobody knows where he has gone. Nobody knows if he was killed in the earthquake. Nobody knows if he took the opportunity to kind of split and run. Nobody knows anything about where he has disappeared to. And this now leaves Gemma and Su Ling kind of back where they started, but also having to deal with the aftermath of this devastating earthquake. Now, no one also knows where the Phoenix crown has gone to, because along with Thornton, the crown has also disappeared. That is until 5 years later when the crown suddenly reappears, but not in San Francisco at all. It reappears in Paris at a costume ball. And when the crown reappears, both Gemma and Su Ling are drawn together once more and brought to Paris to figure out what happened to Thornton and what happened to the crown to get it to where it is now. So I don't know too much else about the book, but I'm really, really excited. I love Kate Quinn. She always tells a really gripping story. She focuses mostly around World War I and World War II and kind of post World War I and post World War II. So it'll be interesting to read something that's in a bit of a different time period than she usually writes. And as I mentioned, I've read Dragon Spring Roads by Janie Chang, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm excited to kind of see how the two of them work together and write together. So this is The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Janie Chang. And why don't we go over to Al to see what their next anticipated read is going to be.
All right. So, again, if you've listened to our top 5 books of 2023 podcast, which you should, you'll know that Lee Mandello's Feed Them Silence was high up on my personal best list of books written 2023. So it won't surprise anyone that Mandello's next outing, The Woods All Black, has made my most anticipated list for early 2024. So this is a trans romance set in 1920s Appalachia, with monsters lurking in the woods as well as in the town church. Leslie Bruin is assigned to Spar Creek by the Frontier Nursing Service for the usual reasons: to vaccinate the people, to birth their babies, and for Leslie to weather the judgments of those who look at him and see a failed woman. But Leslie has seen the Western Front. Leslie has made himself a man, so he thinks he can handle whatever this small town can throw at him. But there's a darkness lurking in the local congregation, and he's going to have to work hard and fast to have any chance of saving the target of their ire. So, it's a trans romance. It's got horror, it's got monsters in the woods, it's got human monsters. It's been described as, quote, an Appalachian period piece that explores reproductive justice and bodily autonomy, the terrors of small town religiosity, and the necessity of fighting tooth and claw to live as who you truly are. So I am immediately sold. I loved Feed Them Silence. I really want to pick up Summer Suns, which is Lee Mandello's first book. And sounds like it's a bit more traditional horror like this one. Give me the monsters, Lee. Just give me the monsters. I wanna read about the monsters. Um, yeah, I think I'm going to toss it next to Kareen. Kareen, what have you got for us?
All right, then I won't take a sip of tea. This is a book that Virginia very generously let me talk about because it's on both of our lists. And again, these lists are in no particular order. They're just whatever is in my phone. But I know that this book is very highly anticipated by, I would say, like quite a few members on staff, Virginia, myself, Sydney, um, people that appreciate something really weird, really, really, uh, really weird. To the point that there are stories in her previous collection that haunt me to this day. I do not see the world I once did, thanks to Bora Chung. She changed me and others. And I think she's going to change us again. So, of course, this is the author of Cursed Bunny. Honestly, one of my surprising top books of that year because it's definitely more in Virginia's wheelhouse than it is in mine. But it is translated by my man, Anton Her, who is going to show up again in this podcast because, of course, he will. So this is her follow-up to kind of like the critically acclaimed Cursed Bunny. Apparently, this collection of short stories focuses a little bit more on kind of like sci-fi elements, or is a little bit more futuristic, as witnessed by like the mess-making angry robot on the cover. It's called Your Utopia after one of the stories. And because it's, like a collection of short stories, in most of kind of like the blurbs that I've seen talking about it, they've only give kind of like little hints of what the stories are about. The highlight for me is definitely the story that is called One More Kiss, Dear, which is about a one-sided love story that blossoms between a person and the AI in their elevator, as told by the point of view of the elevator. There is the Center for Immortality Research, which is about a very hardworking employee who is putting together some sort of gala to celebrate the mysterious benefactors who looking to live forever. However, there is a terrible crime at the event, of which he is unfairly blamed for. And one would think that that would result in, like being arrested or something like that, but she can't leave. No one can ever leave. You have to stay at work forever. Um, these stories are going to be, I think, as Anton Chi said, haunting, gross, terrifying, funny, uncanny. They're going to tackle those wonderful kind of big subjects that she likes to do. They're going to be like about dystopian future, death, feminism, climate change, capitalism, technology, in a wonderfully flippant way that will terrify you and make you look at everyday objects as a source of deep, deep fear and distrust. This one is coming out in January. I think I've got it pre-ordered. Virginia, you have it pre-ordered? Have you read this one, Virginia? Ooh, do you have anything more to add? I feel like we could all sing the praises of this author, but yeah, anything to add about this one? Because I know it was on your list.
Well, like, see, like other people can like nonsense. It's not just me. I mean, honestly, like you make fun of my nonsense and you start talking about your utopia and Bora Chung. Come on. Come on.
But it all tracks, Virginia, in
Does
that, like,
it?
in her stories, A leads to B leads to C. I understand why the AI elevator is falling in love with the human, and then there's a plot progression that I can follow, and I understand what happens at the end.
And from that last story with the toilet, you understand what's going on with that toilet?
The toilet baby was a metaphor.
Sure, sure.
Anyways, I'm gonna throw it over to Sadie, my ally in this.
I'm not your ally in toilet whatevers. Sorry, sorry. Let's bring it back to a bit more of a logical place once again. I feel like that's going to be the theme of today, is maybe me bringing it back to logic and some good old-fashioned YA magic murder. Yeah. So I'm just going to read this straight from the Goodreads page because I feel like you will understand truly why this is on my list just from this description. A teenage sorcerer's apprentice must solve her boss's murder in order to prove her innocence in this twisty, magic-infused murder mystery. Yep. So this is These Deadly Prophecies by Andrea Tang. And so this follows Tabitha Zhang, who is apprentice to one of the world's most famous sorcerers. She has challenges in that job, but the one that she did not expect was to have to solve crimes in her job. But when she comes to work and she finds her boss, the fortune teller sorcerer Solomon, he's not dead, but he predicts his own death. And well, then he dies. Then he's accurate in his prediction, and then he dies. Tabitha must now try and figure out what to do. Now, not only does she have to solve this mystery, she has to solve this mystery because she is one of the prime suspects. Along with her, the police are also looking at Solomon's youngest son, Callum. And so, to no surprise of anybody, I'm sure, Callum and Tabitha decide to team up to solve Solomon's murder. Logical. So logical. However, solving a murder might not be as easy as one might think it is. I don't know if anyone thinks solving a murder is easy. But anyways, Callum and Tabitha have to kind of navigate the wealthy, connected, magical societies and members of not only Callum and Solomon's family, but also just the greater magical, wealthy community in general, and try and figure out who could possibly want Solomon dead, and also try and figure out exactly what's going on and why they're being framed for this murder. And then there's also the question of Callum. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to go romance because it says that Tabitha's not sure if she can trust Callum. So it might go the other way. It might go betrayal at between Callum and Tabitha, but we will see. So yes, this is a kind of fun fantasy murder mystery that I am very excited about. Comes out beginning of February, and I think it's just going to be kind of a really fun, quick read. That kind of fits right into my wheelhouse. So I'm very, very excited about that. Okay, so let's go back to Virginia.
All right. So while my first, and which I should probably also acknowledge that it was translated by David Boyd. I forgot to mention that. Sorry about that. But my first book is sort of like this delightful feast for my brain. The second one is sort of the complete opposite because it's a giant ball of emotions and despair. So, which is, of course, what the other thing that I love so much. So coming out in February from Seven Story Press is from a poet from Mexico, but this is her debut novel, and it's called Fury by Clio Mendoza, translated by Christina McSweeney. And our story starts with two soldiers, Lazaro and Juan. They fought for the opposite sides during the Mexican Revolution, but due to a shared incident, they both decided to desert the army and run away. They became lovers, and they hide away in a cave. And as the story progresses, we learn that perhaps Lazaro and Juan are not strangers after all. And of course, through my favorite kind of storytelling style, which is multiple narratives all woven together, going back and forth when you have no idea what's going on. We got Lazaro and Juan's story. We also have a story of Vicente, who is a salesman, who is now tied up like a dog because he bites in his backyard. We have Salvador, who works in a morgue, that got lost one day in the desert while looking for a woman. And when he was found, he kind of forgets whether he's a human or whether he's an animal. And through these narratives of some really, really broken people against this very like desert kind of backdrop, we will be flung into this cycle of violence that just keep getting passed on from generation to generation. And we see these characters trying to deal with the pain of the past, their past actions of love, of desire, of helplessness, of abandonment, that all trap them into this cycle that they can't get out of. And of course, this book is relentless. It's like a fever dream, existential, which of course my favorite word of last year. It's disturbing, it's tender, and it's told in such beautiful, poetic, hypnotic language. I read this one already, and it was just like because I usually read multiple books, and I just keep finding myself wanting to go back to this book to just get into the world again, and just get stuck into this deep, deep well of despair with along with all these people. I think it's just like the kind of book that I needed, and also really excited to see a new author that I have never kind of read. Again, from like translated from Mexico. So really, I think it's one of those books like many of my books from my last years, like they're not books that you want to recommend to people because they are like really kind of hard to read, but it's hard to describe, I think, on a podcast when you're trying to entice people to read a book. But it's so beautiful, and it's so sad and depressing, but it's also a little bit of hope at the same time, kind of thing. Like it's yeah. Anyway, it's just completely my type of book. It's hypnotic. I think that's kind of how I would describe this book. You will get sucked in. If you are the right type of reader. So again, this is Fury by Kylo Mendoza, and it's translated by Christina McSweeney. So let's bring the mood back up. We're going to go to Emma.
Alrighty. So I know I like to read a lot of graphic novels, a lot of kids literature, a lot of young adult literature, but I've also been trying to get back into reading more adult nonfiction and poetry lately. So while looking for books to talk about on this podcast today, I was checking out one of my favorite publishers of adult nonfiction and poetry. It's called Grey Wolf Press, and they're based out of my old home of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And a lot of my favorite titles that I read while studying English and gender studies in my undergraduate were by Grey Wolf authors. So I was hoping to find something really good to look forward to for this upcoming year. So the book from the Grey Wolf catalog that I'm most excited about is a poetry anthology by a bunch of different Grey Wolf authors coming together and writing poems and then kind of discussing the poems by the other poets in the book. So it's called Raised by Wolves, 50 Poets on 50 Poems. The Grey Wolf website describes it as as a community document. So it's 50 Grey Wolf poets that then select 50 poems by other Grey Wolf poets, and they offer their own insightful reflections on their selections. So it's not just poems by these poets, it's also kind of a discussion, a discourse, and that's why it's like a community document. It's this kind of beautiful, beautiful piece that spans generations, it spans different languages and styles, and the publisher's website described it as a shared vision for the future. So at this point in my reading career, I've only read a select few of these poets so far. Claudia Rankine is featured in it, and she wrote the book Citizen that some people might be familiar with. That book is less of a poem and more, it's called like a lyrical essay. It's very cool if you're interested in like racial justice, social justice, and the experiences of Black people in America. I would highly recommend Citizen. And another poet featured in this book is one of my favorites, a Minneapolis local named Dinez Smith, who's a non-binary poet and writes a lot about the queer experience and the Black experience in America. So I'm really excited to see what these poets have to offer, but also how they choose to talk about the other poems in the anthology and the other poets that are featured. So this book is called Raised by Wolves, 50 Poets on 50 Poems, and it's going to be out in January. I think we're coming back to book 3, so I'll send it over to Kareen because I'm excited to hear what kind of totally linear A to B to C narrative she has to talk about this time.
I'm not saying you can't have like flashbacks. I'm not saying you can't play with the narrative form, but everything has to link to everything else because that's how life works. Like you can like do flashbacks and flash forwards and play around with your format, but it needs to make sense at the end of the day when you look back on it. Anyways, Sadie's with me. That's all I care about. All right. So what happens when Sailor Moon grows up? What happens when Sailor Moon gets a credit card? What happens when Sailor Moon moves out of her parents' house and has to pay bills? That is the question that Park Sol Yeon is asking in A Magical Girl Retires. Um, Also translated by my man, Anton Her. So this story is actually about a 29-year-old who is depressed. Her life is stuck in a rut, and she is drowning in credit card debt. And so she decides to kind of end it all one day by jumping off a bridge, but she is saved by Roa, a clairvoyant, mystical creature coming to find the most magical girl in all of the land. And Rose seems to think that our character is it. And so suddenly, our protagonist feels like they have purpose. Their life has a plan. It all makes sense. Except it turns out that being a magic girl isn't so much like a destiny as it is like just another job. So it includes going to job fairs, joining a trade union, attending class and professional development. And whereas where she thought she was going to get a magical wand, it's a magical credit card that she has to use to solve the problems. And instead of like battling giant mechs trying to take over Seoul or like evil sorcerers bent on destruction of all humankind, she has to fight climate change. Yeah, it's not exactly the classical fantasy life that she thought that she was going to be living. So this looks to be a delightful kind of take on all the tropes that we know and love, but with like a healthy dash of realism of what it would look like to be Sailor Moon in the real world, where you still have to pay rent, even though you're fighting like big cosmic forces, and about kind of like the universal search for meaning in our lives. I am really looking forward to this book that comes out in April. It's got a like beautiful inspired cover. It's translated by my favorite translator of all time. And, you know, for all of us who watch Sailor Moon and then have to pay our phone bills, I think it will be a lovely tale. All right, I am going to chaotically throw it to Al.
All right, so I've talked about two horror novels already, so it's time for something completely different. A cozy sci-fi novel with a mystery bubbling underneath. So, Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis is about the Grand Aviona, a spaceship that doubles as a luxury hotel. It offers fine food, excellent service, and spectacular views as it moves from planet to planet, star system to star system. But it's not only a luxury hotel, it's also a prime location for intrigue of all sorts. From the staff to the guests, everyone has their secrets, and at the center of it all is Carl, the once stowaway, now longtime manager and caretaker of the hotel. This book is a follow-up to and set in the same world as Curtis's first book, a space western called Frontier, which came out last year and which I have on my bookshelf at home, but which has fallen prey to the eternal quandary that books I buy fall into. Library books take priority because they have return dates, and as a librarian, I'm constantly bringing home new library books. So books I own fall to the wayside. Still, this book looks intriguing and I'm excited to pick it up. Early reviews indicate that it's written in multiple POVs, with each chapter told from a different perspective, which seems like potentially a really interesting structure. It's been described as the Grand Budapest Hotel in space, and it seems like just the cozy pick to keep me from going too insane between horror novels. So, for maybe something similarly cozy, or at least kind of sci-fi fantasy, I'm going to throw it to Sadie.
All right, I think it's actually quite fitting that that Al was came up right before me because you might not be interested in this one, but I know you were interested in this author. So the book that I am very, very, very excited about comes out in April. So it just snuck into this episode, April 9th, is Leigh Bardugo's newest adult historical fiction fantasy. So this is a genre that Leigh Bardugo has not really tackled before. This is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. And this follows Lucia Cotado. And Lucia lives in a shabby house on a shabby street in the new capital of Madrid. And Lucia spends her days using tiny little bits of magic to just get through her life as a scullery maid. However, one day, while Lucia is trying to hide and cower in the kitchen so that she is not noticed, the mistress of the house discovers that Lucia has a talent for these little miracles, she calls them. And she demands that Lucia uses her gifts to better the family's social position. Now, Lucia doesn't really want to, but also does not really see that she has much of a choice in the matter. And so she begins to provide simple amusement for the bored nobility with her tiny little bits of magic. However, when she performs these little miracles, she starts to get noticed by Antonio Perez. And Antonio is, or used to be, the secretary to Spain's king. However, he is now disgraced, and he would do absolutely anything to get back in the king's favor. And he sees Lucia as his way to get back into the king's favor. Now, Lucia also sees this as an opportunity to maybe better her fortunes and better her life. And so she seizes this opportunity and is plunged into a world of seers, alchemists, hucksters, a world where magic and science and fraud are kind of just blended together, and no one really knows the difference between any of them. And she finds that she starts getting noticed not just by this world, but by everyone. And this might not be a good thing because Lucia is Jewish. And she knows that if she is found out as being Jewish, then it will doom her in this time period and in many others. So she will have to use her wit, she will have to use her will, she will have to use her magic, and she will have to rely on an immortal familiar named Guyenne Santango. And maybe together they will be able to find a way out of this. Or maybe they're both going to die in the process. We will see what happens. So this, as I said, I'm very excited. I love Lee Bardugo's work, as you all know. My husband also reads Lee Bardugo, and he was highly disappointed when I told him, "Oh my gosh, Lee Bardugo has a new book. It's a historical fiction fantasy." He's like, "What?" But we will see. He might read it anyways. And I'm curious, Alice, if you knew about this one, and if you are also interested in this kind of genre by Lee Bardugo.
Yeah, I did know about this one, and I was going to talk about it until I saw that you had it listed. So I am also very excited for this.
Excellent. So that was The Familiar by Lee Bardugo. Oh, there it is. All right, let's go over to Emma. What is your third book, Emma?
Okay, so this feels a little bit like a cop-out, but because so many people have been waiting for this book, but I can't talk about new publications coming out in 2024 or early 2024 that I'm looking forward to without talking about Amulet. So, for those who are not familiar with Amulet, it's this amazing series of children's graphic novels centering on our protagonist, Emily, who's a young 12-year-old girl at the beginning of the series, and she discovers this magical amulet in her great-grandfather's house that then sends her to a magical world where she has to protect it from the evil elf king. So it's got kind of some similar like fantasy tropes. You've got this other world that she enters into, very Narnia. She's a chosen one, very Harry Potter. So there's some similar things going on that we've seen before in a lot of other kids' fantasy books. But Emily is a bit of a typical chosen one. At first, she rejects her calling, and she soon realizes though that the amulet gives her the strength to protect those that she loves with its magic power. So she chooses to dedicate herself to her calling and defend the magical world of Aladia. Now, there are currently 8 volumes of Amulet out, and the 9th and the final volume was slated for release in 2021. Then it was pushed to 2022. And now, finally, in February 2024, which is 16 years after the publication of the first book, Amulet will finally reach its conclusion. So I only started reading Amulet for the first time this year. And since I read a lot of graphic novel series, I read a lot of manga series, I'm pretty used to the like you read a book and then you have to wait forever for the next one to come out, then you wait forever for the next one to come out. And I don't like that. Not a fan of a hiatus. And so when I started Amulet and I realized that I'd have to wait so long for the next volume, which didn't even have a release date at the time, I was like, stop. I'm going to put a pause on it. I'm going to wait until I know that the next one's going to be out. So I actually only read through like volume 3 and chose to not continue the series until I knew that the ending was coming. And so I'm so hyped to finally pick it back up and finally be able to find out how the series ends. But for readers who have been waiting patiently for years for this final volume, congrats, you're nearly there. And for those of us who haven't checked out Amulet yet, I would highly recommend grabbing volume 1 before volume 9 is released, because the whole list is going to get super long, like absurdly long. So you got to read it now. And I know I'll be catching up before February. So volume 9, the subtitle is Wave Rider, is going to be the final volume of the Amulet series, and it's out February 6th. So I'm very excited for that one. All right, I think next we will hear from Virginia. Let's hear what your book 3 is.
All right, so Willie is another poet turned novelist for me. This is coming out in January, and this is called Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. And I only preview this one, and I keep like I have to stop myself from reading it because I'm like, Sadie, like we'll save it for Sadie's episode. But I just get totally sucked into by the character's voice. It's just so good. And has already earned really high praises from like authors like Tommy Orange and Lauren Groff, and everybody keeps saying that this is a novel that will stay with you for a very long time. So I'm looking forward to, now that I've done this episode, I can go and actually read it. So in this book, we meet Cyrus Shams, who is a drug addict, a recovering alcoholic. And Cyrus has quite an interesting job. He is an actor in a training hospital. So what his job is, for 20 bucks an hour, every day he would get like different cards, and on the cards it would give him like what he's supposed to be today. And he acts as either the patients, or he would act as like the patients' families. And each of the card has like, some the basic information about the character that he's supposed to play that day. And it also comes with different emojis to symbolize how much pain this person is having. So every day you get these cards with these emojis, and he has to like channel that person and how much pain this person is supposed to having. And then what he does is he goes and meet with these students who are training to be doctors and nurses, and they are supposed to deliver bad news to him about what's happening to him. And he has to like react according to his card. And that's how to help these, I guess, these to be doctors and nurses, like figure out how to deal with patients. And that's what his job is. His roommates think this is a terrible job for Cyrus because Cyrus has enough things to deal with. He is gay. He is the son of Iranian immigrants, and that makes life really hard. His mom was on a plane that was shot down by accident by the US Navy. And his father, who has been a worker forever at a chicken farm, died from a stroke. So he has got lots and lots of things going on. And all Cyrus wants, I think, is to try to figure out like meaning of life. So he gets like obsessed with not just his art, but he got obsessed with this idea of a martyr, because he wants his life to mean something. And moreover, he wants his death, whenever that is, to mean something also. So he started like getting into this whole idea of martyrs, and he started doing all the research about it. And then he come across a living martyr, a painter who has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, who decided not to seek medical help, but decided to live her final days out in a Brooklyn museum. And so Cyrus decided to go visit this painter to talk to this living martyr, so that maybe he can try to find a way to find out what it means to be alive, and why do we need to stay alive. And that's sort of what the story is, and it's supposed to be like, just, like, you can imagine, like, it's going to be a really sad novel, a very, very, like, um also, but it's also gonna be funny. I think it's also gonna be like, it's a funny and sad novel at the same time. Again, it's gonna got a lot of different points of views. Apparently, at some point, you're gonna visit this uncle of Cyrus, who has like, who used to like dress up as the angel of death, when he was in during the war, so that he could go inspire and comfort like people that are dying, or whatever. So he's gonna go through all these different sort of characters, and of course, like Al, same thing. Like, I love multiple points of view. I love like a story that you hear from different people, and but I think Cyrus' voice so far is so, so, so good. And again, like, I think it was interesting because sometimes, like, when I like recently, many of the books that I read are like, they're all like by poets, novels, and they're doing really like they've been so good. I think just the language, you can tell, like, just the rhythm of the story and everything, it's just is amazing. So I'm really looking forward now that I can like go and read it and finish this book. So this is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar.
All right. Well, thank you to my book friends. That was our 3 out of our 5 picks for today that we are most excited about reading in the beginning of 2024. We're going to sign off for now, but make sure that you tune back in next episode to hear what our final 2 picks are for the beginning of 2024, and maybe an existential question or two. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you next time. Thank you from Keep It Fictional. Have a great day and happy reading.